Hello and welcome back to Endless Legend. Today I'm joined by Dave Farum from America. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Lewis.
Am I pronouncing that okay?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, thank God. Tell me why you are joining us to tell us about Endless Legend.
Well, I have actually played a whole bunch of Endless Legend, and I was playing it a long time ago. I really enjoy it. Like, I'm never going to be as good as even you are at Civ 5. I don't know, I just can't wrap my head around this game. But Endless Legend, I love 4X games, and Endless Legend, and all the Amplitude games, like Endless Space, too. They've always been great, so I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, and we know nothing. Also, there's been quite a big update, and I wanted to go through with you and talk about what's been added, what's been changed, and also learn a bit more about the game. Because I think that would actually be really helpful for all of us here, and also the viewers, I think, would be interested.
Okay.
So where to start? Well, I guess like with a normal multiplayer game, we usually make like a friends multiplayer game with like 5 people. What settings should we be using?
So
and,
I
how
know.
should we be playing?
I know that you like to use fast to keep things moving, but the game is really, really balanced around normal. This is probably the most unfortunate part about Endless Legend. The fast game just isn't balanced. They're saying they're working on it, but I would stick to that. So
doesn't this mean that a game will go on for 12 hours or something? I mean, 'cause that's one of the problems with Civ, that our games last sometimes 7 or 8 hours, and that makes it kind of quite awkward to play with your friends because you never really get started. You have to sort of organise multiple sessions and come back. And I don't think we mind doing that, but I certainly feel like, also, I always feel that with a game that lasts 12 hours, you don't want to knock your friends out, because you might knock someone out after 3 hours and then it's just going to be 4 of you. And so I always find that when we play these games, we want to play them fast. And get them sort of done sooner rather than later, or at least within a sort of 6 to sort of 9 hour time span. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think that normal games take 12 hours. I mean, it varies, but especially if you change the animation speeds to be fast, you'll find yourself wrapping up by turn 250 either way. And, so I don't know how long your last game took, but, you'll find yourself maybe going 1/3 longer than that. It sort of depends, especially once you know what's going on, and if you have a turn timer, it's all good. But you can see, the speed scale and the, getting that to very fast, and you can also put timers on the battles too if you want to, which is kind of good. That can help quite a bit. So
what should we be going with? On this, if we were setting up a multiplayer game here, what would we choose? Would we choose this, or would we choose the normal? What would your recommendation be?
I would set it to normal. I think just people will feel more natural in there. If someone wants to do a battle in auto, it'll go just as fast. So speed scale, and you can set battle deployment. You can set those timers if you want to, or you can just have a gentle folks agreement to not take forever there. I don't know if that's reasonable.
I think that it's always difficult though, because people forget to press the end turn or forget to press the go button, and when you've got more people, 6 or 8 people. It's very easy for people to start forgetting, and some of the games that we have in private are often a bit of a problem because as soon as people start tabbing out, that's what I've found. If you have these long turns, other people aren't pressing the end turn timer, people start tabbing out, and then as soon as that starts happening, people aren't really into the game anymore, and that's something that I've really wrestled with. So. I mean, I think that what you're saying already is that we need to use settings which are for a long game. But haven't they added some different things in the last update for that, or something?
Yeah. There's some new settings, but yeah, once you set the battle targeting to 15, and that just really keeps things moving along quickly. There you go. Okay. And as for start, there's no reason to have a timer if you have a turn timer on that. I think that's pretty good. I actually use battle targeting timers in my game to keep, when I do personal single player games, to keep things moving fast, so that I don't have a temptation to walk away. Everything else here looks fine.
Okay. Apply. So otherwise, what does difficulty actually change in multiplayer?
Well, in multiplayer, it changes the strength. The most noticeable thing is the strength of the factions, right?
Right.
And it also can change some RNG things, like what comes out of ruins. I would leave it at normal. There's zero reason to have it at higher levels.
Okay.
The game is hard enough in multiplayer.
we found some settings for custom worlds, which is what we used last time. We were told that what you should do is you should have a world which actually has a very small percentage of land and large sea, because that keeps it more like a Pangea and less like a square.
Yeah.
And we found that worked quite nicely. So it was one continent with basically just the one island sea around the edge and a small amount of land on a larger world than we would expect. So I've seen some people put some of these things on, like people have put minor faction difficulty up.
Yeah.
And things like this as well. Is that something you recommend doing?
No, I mean, given what happened to Sai in your last game, I would actually put them down. You don't want someone to be knocked out by the minor factions. You want them to be knocked out by a player. One of the big differences, I think, with Endless Legend versus like Civ is that you kind of like some players are going to be forced by their faction into strategies that knock people out. It is super no fun if those people aren't allowed to continue because of minor faction stuff. So I generally keep, when I'm talking multiplayer, you don't get to play the game too often that way, but I keep the faction difficulty a little bit lower because I want the players to be the primary threat.
Right. I always find that having harder minor faction difficulty means that it's actually a slower progression in order to, and slightly more trickier to wage war against other people in a way, because there's a delay to expansion, a delay to the mid game. What I don't like really is for people to be very easily able to rapidly expand out and snag a whole bunch of continents, because that will provoke, maybe that's an okay thing to do to provoke early game war, but I feel like with harder minor faction difficulties, it's a real burden for someone to try and expand beyond their means.
I think it polarizes the factions, though. Like, we'll see with Wild Walkers when we start them out for the initial game thing, you'll see that they have a really easy time expanding, and no amount of factions is going to change that.
Okay.
Because they'll be doing at early game, they can be easily doing double to triple the production of everybody else. So like you tend to kind of penalize. There are carry factions, to use a Dota term, right? Where like Ardent Mages are a great example of a carry faction. They only really come into their own about mid game, and before that they're struggling. They're forced to make alliances. They're a supremacy type of faction, but they demand diplomacy early on. So when you do that, you kind of you unbalance some of the things, or like necrophages, for example, have to kill minor factions to survive in the early game, and you will specifically target them. If no one plays necrophages, then it's fine.
Okay, so I mean that's pretty much the start. So talking about like the empires a little bit, if we could just do like a little bit of an overview of how you see these playing out in multiplayer,
sure,
and what that really means. So like we'll start with Wind Walkers, which previously Duncan has played. They like forests. Forests start. They get good ranged units. Beyond that, I don't know. You tell me.
Sure.
More.
Wild Walkers are probably the most typical of the, like for a 4X game. They're really straightforward. They do high production focused expansionist. They're actually really strong. Duncan sort of tapped into that briefly in the first game, but didn't really know how to execute on it. Once you get some strong frontline units, their archers can actually get a better range than anybody else in the game, and they can hit really hard. So and you get such high production, and the archers are so cheap to produce, that it becomes kind of this unending wave of arrows raining down on you, and it doesn't feel like it matters if you win or not.
Right.
And that's really frustrating. So they're a great race. They have a really cool storyline too. So I love them. And look at that guy's head. What's even going on there?
He is like King of Lord Lefairy's Oberon, isn't he? I tend to call these guys the Wind Wakers, because I don't know where that comes from, but that seems to be like what I considered them to be, like some sort of druidic people. So yeah, so what kind of victory types are we talking about here? Are they talking supremacy, or
you would almost always go? Yes, supremacy is probably the easiest one to go for these guys. Although with their changes, they're actually pretty good at going for their, like, there's a new victory condition that got introduced with the update, quest line. You can actually finish their quest line. Of all the races, I have had more success with them in doing that, and you can actually win the game by finishing their quest line and building something, which is great because they're really good at building things.
Right, but I mean, I think that's the trouble we've had doing the main quests before, is that what we tend to get blocked up on the main quests. Now, whether that's because it gives us something a bit strange that we can't do, like settle in a region, that has X amount of gold around it, or something funny, like we've struggled, and also, or something is like, some of the things are have this guy as your diplomacy, as your governor for 10 turns.
Right.
But we've only got 150 turns to do this. So, what some of the main quest lines we've really had trouble doing on fast.
Yeah.
Because of the very nature of the way they're coded. It also felt, in a way, for me, like the main quests were quite lazily done in many ways. I don't think I've ever completed a single main quest of any of the races, and I've played, probably 20 games of this. So, that's how I feel about the main quest. I feel that it's not very good.
Yeah,
generally.
Well, so for some of the classes, they're even for like the Ardent Mages, for example, and Necrophages too. A couple others like Cultists. You need to do them to stay competitive because they give you units.
Right. They give you key buffs as well to like your racial. They give key empire buffs across your whole empire. Yeah.
One of the reasons the whole Reddit was recommending that you guys didn't play on fast was because the races aren't yet the races in their quests aren't yet balanced around fast. So you still get the normal turn timings, which are just brutal. Because units don't go any faster in fast. It's just builds, right? So you'll be like, hey, get over here in 3 turns because it's reduced for fast. And you're like, it's physically impossible for me to do that, right? I would have to have already known, right? So on normal, you'll find that they're a little bit easier. There are some quests where you're required to go to war, but that's sort of like the fun of it's the difficulty of the faction. Like Vaulters are, like was you see there on the right of the Matrix, they are a turtle faction, right? They're a late game turtle faction with strong science. Kind of tricky to play. And if they're given a quest that forces them to break that. And actually go out and fight, because otherwise they would be like the Babylon and they would just hide in the corner.
I think that's what happened with Duncan. He had a lot of Marines, didn't he? And he was forced, and one of his quests said to attack someone else's city, and he didn't want to do it. And certainly I think I can see that being a good catalyst in multiplayer for causing drama and stuff. So, yeah. But are the Vaulters like someone who they're quite a simple race? It felt like as well, and easy enough to play, much like the Windwalkers. They got a good, strong ranged unit. Is the main quest something that can be done as well? And what's their victory condition? Is their victory condition science victory? Because that seems to be.
They're the best at science victory, in my opinion. They get a couple buildings that allow them to ignore winter, which means that they can actually produce the wonders that they research, which is the big challenge to the end game of science.
So science really victory is to get 3 of the techs from the very last tech trees. It's almost like future techs in Civ. Do they do anything, those really, really advanced techs?
Oh, yes, they do. Like the battle one doubles your power and life.
Okay.
So your damage and life. So I mean, like
wow.
When you get it, if you get it, you will be overwhelmingly powerful. Like nothing will stop you if you have that, except for somebody else who has that. Imagine the Vaulters with the health of Draken and doing twice as much damage as they were. It would be nuts, and it is nuts.
Okay. The other big science Civ are the Ardent Mages, aren't they?
Yeah.
And is that partly because of the things like the arcana, the sort of the things you plop down on the map, which buff science around them? Where is it? Is it this one? No. You know what I mean, though?
I do. There are the first pillar you get allows you to up the science of a tile.
Yeah.
They have a lot of advantages. They also they're sort of science by necessity. Their units all have very great attack stats, but very poor defense stats. So you can either snowball and go for high attack and just have the highest attack, right? They actually have some of the strongest units in the game if you do it right. Or, as strong as I say, like just some pure hit damage. Or you can, shore up their weaknesses and go for armor, but you really want to do one or the other because otherwise you'll get wiped out. But their research and stuff like that, they get a lot of bonuses to having lots of science. So they're generally a race optimized around that with a military bent.
Right, okay. I played the Broken Lords a fair bit, and they are a lot of fun because they don't need food at all. You can't even see food. You can't build anything to do with food. They love the dust. But I made the mistake really of completely neglecting science when I played.
That's true. It was definitely in your last multiplayer game. You were teched out, and once you started catching up at the end, you actually started being competitive again. It was kind of fun to watch the giant U shape on your score graph. But in fact, they were considered brokenly good for a long time, and in the patch they got nerfed a little bit because they're so good. But they're a fantastic race. They use dust for pretty much everything, but they're still quite competitive. Their units are amazingly good, and with some minor factions, they have some of the strongest military plays in the game. Very, very fun and very different kind of race. It's an example of how Endless Legend really changes the playstyles. For example, Wildwalkers would never want to settle in the desert unless there's tons of like oases nearby. Broken Lords they want the desert. A desert with a river in it is the best thing for Broken Lords.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, you look at the tiles when you're Broken Lords, and you know some places I just didn't want to go at all because there was just no dust there.
Right.
Whereas other places were really wow. You know, I would get so much resources from specific locations. The Missouri, I think, are just a reskinned version of Voltas, aren't they?
Yeah. For now,
right? Yeah.
The next update should differentiate them more, which we're all very excited about.
Okay, cool. And then obviously there's the two other races that we've seen a fair bit of. The Draken have won all of our multiplayer games so far. It feels like it's their units that are the really very, very strong, surprisingly tanky and strong units, but also in a multiplayer game, having that ability to turn a 2v1 into a 1v1, you know, is remarkably powerful.
The
so
biggest
they can
weakness,
force peace on someone who's attacking them, basically.
Yeah, and that's super powerful. It's their superpower, and you know it may be that you want to not play. Their army is probably the easiest to use of the armies in the sense that you don't need to do a lot of research to get really good results from it, which is I think why people see it a lot. You know, you only really need Drakenlings and Wyverns and your hero to make a very effective army with them. And because all the units look like awesome dragons, people tend to make balanced armies, which is an important part of combat.
Right.
But yeah, they're not overwhelmingly strong in the general tier. They're good, and they're easy to use, so I think a lot of people have success with them. My first victory was with the Draken, but certainly they're not my favorite race. Because the problem with influence mining is that if no one attacks you and you're not actually winning on everything else, it kind of is a waste, right? You have great empire plans, but you don't have terrific ways to follow them up. The only really obvious play for them, if people don't fall into the trap of a war with you, which they constantly try to have to chase you to slow down your production, is to go for a diplomatic victory, which is really hard to do in multiplayer.
It seems, what's their victory condition? I mean, you say diplomatic, but what does that actually mean?
Every time that someone mutually enters peace with you, then you start getting points, and those points pile up. And it's a hidden counter. There will be a couple cases where they show it, and it depends on the game speed. At fast, it happens surprisingly fast to make it possible at all. But once you reach a certain point, it's gonna be like, hey, just want to warn you, this is about to happen. They're about to win the game just by diplomacy, by having peace and mutual setups. The most interesting thing about the Draken doing that is that's actually their way of staying competitive. Their science is kind of meh. So what they'd have to do is start trading between different factions to get like the science and production and things they need.
Okay, so I mean, I don't understand trading at all.
Don't worry.
And certainly I don't understand the diplomatic side of this game at all. So this is something which is really lacking from my game.
Their estimation of overpoweredness is more a function of they're very good in a novice's hands, and they're very good if people don't understand weapon types. Like, for example, when I think it was Ben was playing, right? He had the Draken in the last multiplayer game, and nobody used bows against his flying units that did all the damage. Right? They tried to focus on the Drakenlings, and that's exactly the trap that they want you to fall into, right? Hit my hit point sponges, which I can heal up. Don't try to one-shot or two-shot my actual damage-dealing units. Once you realize that, their army is a lot more difficult to use effectively.
Okay. Army-wise, the best race that I was always told was the Necrophages. They start a war with everyone, and they have a lot of powerful military units, especially necrodrones, that just seem to
it's so good.
Seem to really kill everyone. And I always thought these were the most overpowered race when I sort of started. What do you think about necrophages?
I love them. I love their design. I've played a few games with them, and I have won a +1 difficulty game on them. It's super fun. You cannot have friends in this game, and in a multiplayer game, you pick them, and you're basically making a declaration of war on every other player. To stay competitive, you will have to knock someone out, and I sort of love that aspect. I know that that's a little tricky for recording, but in a multiplayer setting, it's super fun to be like, well, who am I picking that I'm going to go mess with? Because unlike most races, and in most 4X games, when you lose, when you fight someone, it hurts you. The Necrophages have a bunch of checks in place to make sure that when you fight somebody, even if you lose, you actually gain momentum from doing so. So it's really cool.
So is that because they generate corpses that they can then use to feed their city? So they're almost encouraged to send units to attack in order to get those corpses back. Yeah.
Early game, that's how that works. They have good heroes, great units, Well, I mean, their first unit's kind of meh, but they have the Necro Drone is amazing the instant you get it, and it stays amazing throughout the game. They also have access to better equipment than some factions, and yeah, like you said, every time a unit, friend or foe, dies in the battlefield, you get a corpse counter. I think 8 of those in this game mode, they will get basically a huge boost of food to any one city. Timing that with your expansions can put you at 3 or 4 pop instantly.
Right, so so using the stockpiles is something you're supposed to use on new cities, which is a more advanced technique, I guess, but something that we can maybe go into later when we talk about how to use and how to roll that. The other 2 we haven't talked about are cultists, who are a bit weird and really kind of, I think, need their own explanation video because they work in a very strange way. They're I guess they're like the Venice of a decision. They can only have one city, but they interact with the minor factions in quite a different way.
Yeah, they and the necrophages both also are encouraged to build extremely massive cities. Both of them have reasons that they can basically build huge boroughs and get amazingly good cities, like region-spanning cities. Right. So, they're both very different. The cultists are probably the reason that I fell in love with this game. Their design is so good. It's so neat.
Bonkers, aren't they? Yeah. They're really good. They look so strange.
I love that. I love that whole thing.
Rotating marble heads and just they are so alien and terrifying, but also amazing. So you'll see so being next to a cultist is scary, and being next to a necrophage is a scary thing because
I'm way more afraid of the necrophages because they desire your corpses. The cultists oftentimes will play more passive games early on, but then they'll just start taking your minor factions away from you, and you'll be like, "Why'd you do that?" And they'll be like, "Well, I'm the cultist. What are you gonna do?" And you're kind of like, "Please don't kill me."
So and then the thing is, if you do lose a city to them, it gets razed instantly.
Yeah,
and that is quite a punishment. If you don't pay attention and a necrophage takes your city, you can bring an army and come back and take it back. But if you lose it to a cultist, that's it. It's gone off the map forever, and they get huge bonus from doing that.
Yeah,
they get a stockpile equivalent to every pop of that city when they raise one. So it is, in multiplayer, certainly a terrifying thing.
Yeah.
And then we got the Roving Clans, who I don't even know what happens, but it's a lot more to do with the sort of the trading posts, I think, the way they work. And that's something that we've not really used a lot of in our games, I must admit.
Yeah.
Doing on the trading post.
It's too bad because it's a neat thing. There's like a whole marketplace. It's a little bit like Off-World Trading Company in that there's like this marketplace and you can buy and sell goods and services. Another thing that makes Endless Legend neat is that there are all of these cool boosters that you can buy, and there's a mercenary market where you can supplement your army with dust, right? Which I think you were using extensively in your last game.
Yeah.
The Roving Clans have one really unique property. They can't be at war with someone, which is interesting. That actually makes them annoying to the necrophages. But also,
I think they can't declare war. I think they can be declared on.
Yeah, I think they can be declared on, but that makes them interesting because they're basically always going to be trying to defer and run. They can even move their cities into more advantageous positions.
Yeah.
I've watched a few videos of people who do really cool like multi-phase city movement with the Broken Lords or the Roving Clans in unique ways. Like they'll know, if I move this over here, like early on, this is more food, but later on, I won't need that because I'll have all the buildings, and it's so cool.
Oh right, I see. So they can get the production first, and then once they built everything, they can move it onto a load of science tiles. Yeah,
right.
I like the idea of that. It says their victory type is economy. What's the economy victory?
If your total dust income, so if you add up all the dust you've ever made, independent of spending, and it reaches a certain number, you win. You really do need to have outrageously snowballed dust income for that to happen.
Right.
The Roving Clans and the Broken Lords are the two races that could potentially get that kind of dust income, because we're talking like 10k dust a turn for a while to get there. But it's possible.
Well, I mean, I would have thut that if you were playing Roving Clans and Broken Lords were in the game, that economy victory would be out. But also, I feel like if you want to play Roving Clans well, you need someone who's going to be using the marketplace, and therefore the Broken Lords are someone who does use the marketplace very actively.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of dust and they can use it, and it feels like in many other cases some of these other races don't have dust, and therefore pretty much wait for a long time, save up enough dust to get a hero, and then maybe never use it again.
No, you really do want to keep doing it. A lot of people were rushing builds in your games, and that's kind of a mistake. There are ways you can make that better, but you shouldn't be doing it without having used some empire plans and other tricks to make buyouts cheaper. or appropriate race for it. The roving clans and broken lords can kind of enter into a virtuous cycle, or the broken lords could be totally shut down by the roving clans. So it's kind of funny. The roving clans are an kind of ironically really hard counter to some of the aspects of broken lords. Okay. Because they can shut people out of the market. They say, no, you can't engage and trade anymore.
Oh, I see.
It's super powerful.
That's a good intro. Let's actually start getting into a game now, and then so thank you guys. We'll be back with another video. We'll make a game. We're going to have a look at what you should do when you put your city down at the start, the areas, what you should identify. We're going to play as the Wild Walkers, but then I think we'll have a look at some of the other ones as well if we have time, and we'll go one by one. We probably want to talk through the tech tree, what you're gonna get, and then we'll go through and try and make it sensible. But yeah, let us know in the comments. I'll post this as well. I'll post a link to the Reddit thread where everyone will be telling us everything we said wrong.
Yeah, telling me what I said wrong.
Yeah, and you can let us know. And so there should be some better information in there. But yeah, hopefully this is useful, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, for God's sake, I can't take this! Lewis!
What?
Why? Why are you doing this?
I pressed auto.
This isn't your plan, because I want to win! And now I'm getting up with Ben. You guys really fucking suck, honestly.